Good morning. Welcome to our Client Services webinar from Genesis. My name is Victoria O'Connor. I'm one of the counselors here at Genesis, and I will turn it over to my co-leader to introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Belinda Cardwell. I'm also a counselor here at Genesis.
Great, thanks Belinda. So we are happy that you're here watching this video or this live webinar. We want to go over a couple notes before we get started. Please remember that this presentation is for educational purposes, and we ask that you consider your own situation and safety concerns before putting into practice any of the ideas talked about today. Another few notes about safety. Please watch this in a safe place. Wearing headphones to help ensure that no one else can hear what you're watching. Remember to also clear your browser history after watching the video if somebody monitors your phone or your computer. If you are watching this webinar live and need to leave the live Zoom webinar quickly, you do need to click leave and end a couple times. There's a couple buttons you have to push, so make sure you consider that if you do need to leave quickly for safety reasons. Okay, confidentiality is still very important to us with these videos. We ask that you please do not use the chat feature on the Zoom webinar. If you do use the chat feature, your name and comment would be seen by anyone watching the live video and the video recording on YouTube. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube later, if you're watching the video, any comments that you leave will be seen by anyone else who watches the video too. So we ask that you also don't leave any comments on YouTube. If you do have any questions about what we talk about today, we encourage you to reach out to us directly to ask those questions. Here's our contact information here. We don't monitor or respond to any comments or questions left on the YouTube recording page, so also please contact us directly if you do need any help. And this contact information will be at the end of these slides as well, so you can get that information later. If you are in a crisis situation or if you need help with emergency safety planning or need emergency shelter due to domestic violence, you can call our 24-hour hotline number at 214-946-4357. If you would like to sign up for counseling at Genesis at our outreach office, or if you want to talk to a counselor more about your situation, you can also call our outreach number at 214-389-7700. We also have some other hotline resources for you here if you were needing any crisis support. Again, the Genesis shelter number is here, and also the National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 800-799-7233. They also have a chat feature on their website. So if it was not safe for you to call, if it was safer for you to chat with somebody online, you can go to thehotline.org to chat with a person. And also the National Suicide Hotline is 800-273-8255. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about domestic violence, kind of the basics. So October is actually Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this is a really important month here at Genesis and lots of different domestic violence agencies. We are often asked to do a lot of presentations in the community to help spread awareness about domestic violence, and it's just a really important time to help get out the word about what this is and helping to normalize that this is happening to a lot of people. So today I wanted to discuss kind of the basics, kind of explain what is domestic violence, and talk about the impact of domestic violence on survivors, and we will also cover different paths to healing after somebody has experienced domestic violence. A couple of statistics really quick that we think are really important to know. 1 in 4 women in the US will experience domestic violence during her lifetime. So that is a lot of women in our country that are experiencing domestic violence. 1 in 3 teenage girls will be physically assaulted by a boyfriend. So we see that these rates are even higher in team dating relationships, that dating abuse is also very common. Domestic violence is also the leading cause of injury to women between the ages of 15 to 44. So this causes more injuries to this age range, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. So this is clearly an issue that we need to be discussing and that there needs to be awareness about. So what is domestic violence? Domestic violence is sometimes also called intimate partner violence or dating abuse. Relationship abuse is also another term you might hear. You might also hear people say DV or IPV, kind of those acronyms to describe domestic violence and intimate partner violence. It's all kind of the same thing. But domestic violence is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. So a couple of really key things to highlight in this definition here. This is a pattern of behaviors. This is not necessarily a one-time thing where maybe a partner yelled at another partner once. This is a pattern of behaviors over time. And we'll talk about in a second, there's a clear cycle to that pattern. And also the goal of these behaviors is that there's power and control at the center of these intentional behaviors. So one partner is intentionally trying to have power and control over their other partner and doing these abusive behaviors as a means to get the power and control. Throughout this presentation, you'll hear me talk about mostly I'll probably say he as the perpetrator and she as the victim or the survivor of domestic violence. We know that domestic violence happens in all relationships and anybody can be a victim or survivor of domestic violence. We just know statistically most often this is occurring when the male is the perpetrator of the domestic violence and the woman is actually the one who is being abused. And so I will use those pronouns he and she most often, but just please understand too that this can happen in other situations and other ways where sometimes the male is the victim, or this also happens in same-sex relationships too. Another key thing to understand about domestic violence is that it's more than just physical abuse. I think a lot of times in our society, we believe that when we hear domestic violence, we assume, battering, or we assume hitting or physical abuse, but it's so much more than that. It includes verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. We've done several different videos during the past few months covering a lot of education about domestic violence. One of those videos is called the Power and Control Wheel. And I really encourage you to go back to our YouTube page and watch that to also understand some more about these different types of abuse that are happening that are more than physical abuse. We also know that domestic violence occurs in a cycle of violence. Again, we covered the cycle of violence in depth in another video, so I encourage you to go back and watch that one. But this cycle of violence, it can last minutes or even months. So we know that that cycle, especially in the beginning of the relationship, might be longer. And then as time goes on, that can even, start to decrease in time, where that cycle might be happening over a matter of days or even within the same day, a matter of minutes. This cycle goes from the tension building phase, where the victim feels like she's walking on eggshells. She really senses that tension, and maybe there's more verbal abuse or more critical behavior during this time. Then that goes into the violent episode, which can be any incident of verbal, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. And then from there, it goes into the honeymoon phase, which is a period of calmness where a lot of different things can be happening. The partner typically is using kindness as a way to manipulate the victim. We call that manipulative kindness that you see during that honeymoon phase, where he might also be denying the abuse or really minimizing that there was a problem or blaming the victim for the abuse that happened. So it's a really confusing time during that honeymoon phase. And we know that eventually that whole cycle repeats itself over and over again. Like I said, it could be minutes or even months that this cycle is stretching out over. So, types of abuse. Like I said, this is more than physical abuse. This is verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. And I'm going to go over some examples of each of these different types of abuse categories. So, verbal abuse can be things like yelling, calling her names, put downs, using profanity. All of those things are considered verbal abuse. Maybe even making accusations. And eventually, over time, this can start to be that he's putting her down in front of other people, or he's calling her names in front of others, which can be very embarrassing and humiliating too for that victim. From there, that can escalate and increase into emotional abuse. Emotional abuse includes a lot of different things. This could be isolation. We know that abusive partners tend to isolate their partner so that she's less connected, she's less supported, and therefore is more vulnerable to his tactics of power and control. It could be ignoring or the silent treatment as a way to manipulate the situation or a way to get what he wants. Extreme jealousy. Maybe she is not allowed to talk to any male coworkers, or he's showing up at her workplace, or insisting that he's always knowing who she's talking to or where she's going. And that jealousy could even be too justified. Maybe he's saying it's a sign of love. I just love you so much. I just want to make sure that you're okay. I want you all to myself. But that can actually become a way to control her. Financial abuse is also included in this category. Financial abuse happens in almost every abusive relationship. I believe the statistics is about 98 to 99% of abusive relationships. There's some financial abuse happening too. And this could be lots of different things, but it could be potentially that he's controlling her access to the income. Maybe he makes her ask for an allowance, or maybe it's the abusive partner taking the paycheck from their partner, or controlling all of the financial decisions, and the victim does not have a say into how money is spent or any financial decisions. Digital abuse can also be included in this category. So digital abuse is including any of these abusive tactics that are done through technology or over the phone, or done digitally. And so maybe that's verbal abuse online. It could be potentially controlling her phone usage, or controlling who she's texting or talking to. Maybe he controls what app she has, or controls her use of the phone. Maybe even preventing her from having certain social medias, or controlling her, asking for her location or something like that. Gaslighting is also a type of emotional abuse, and this can be where we call it like crazy making behavior, where the abusive partner is trying to get their partner to be so confused and so confused about what's going on that she has to rely on him for what's reality. So what this looks like in practice is a lot of minimizing or denying the abuse. Maybe he's telling her, you're just making that up, you're just overreacting, or you just can't take a joke. And so maybe she starts to question herself and really think, well, am I just overreacting? Am I just am I not getting this joke? She's really going to start to question herself. And that's the whole goal of that gaslighting behavior, is to make her more vulnerable to, again, his tactics for power and control. Stalking or following the partner is also considered emotional abuse. Again, this could be over the phone. So maybe he insists on her sharing her location with him at all times. Maybe he tracks her, through the location finding apps, or even just following her or stalking her too. Anything that's controlling, any behaviors that are controlling, is emotional abuse. So maybe that's controlling who she talks to, controlling where she goes, even controlling what she wears. And then this can also start to sound like threats. So maybe the partner threatens to hurt themselves if she doesn't do something, or maybe they threaten to take the kids away, or threaten to call CPS on her. Maybe he's even threatening to hurt her or to kill her. And so of course that's going to be really scary for the survivor, and she's going to, want to do whatever she can to make sure that she and her family are safe. Then this can escalate and increase into physical abuse. So physical abuse includes, of course, anything that's a harm to the body, but this also includes anything that's a threat to her physical space. So for example, like blocking the door, preventing her from leaving during an argument, or even throwing things or breaking things in front of her. And that's going to be really intimidating. And even if it's not necessarily harming her body directly, she's still going to feel very afraid in that moment, and it's going to change what she's doing. And that's again, that goal. He's trying to have control over her in that moment. Holding the partner down against their will. Of course, pulling hair, and then anything that hurts the body, right? Pushing, shoving, slapping, hitting, punching, kicking, all of those are physically abusive behaviors. Potentially banging the partner's head on the floor or the wall, and that could be really dangerous for her, potentially even leading to brain injuries. Strangulation is a very serious form of physical abuse. Strangulation, or sometimes people call it choking, is when her ability to breathe is interfered with. And we know that when a woman has been strangled by her abusive partner, that she actually has a much greater likelihood that her partner will murder her. So we know when it gets down to the bottom of this list in physical abuse, it's a really big concern for safety, and strangulation is really serious, like I said. Also, the presence of weapons increases her risk of murder too. So if the partner is using weapons to threaten her, or using weapons against her, or even displaying weapons, that's also considered physical abuse. And then finally, we have sexual abuse. So sexual abuse can be, again, a lot of different things. Forcing the partner to dress in a sexual way, that could be considered sexual abuse, or even forcing the partner to watch or to make pornography. Reproductive coercion, or controlling her access to birth control, or maybe he's the one who's controlling all of the decisions about reproduction, and whether or not they decide to have children, or whether or not she has the access to birth control. He's controlling all of that. This could also potentially be involving others in sexual activities against the partner's will. And also, sexual abuse can be coercion. So the partner coerces or manipulates their partner into agreeing to have sex, even though the survivor doesn't really want to. So maybe he's threatening her. If she doesn't have sex with him, then he's going to hurt her. And so she goes along with it and says yes, in order to prevent something worse from happening. Or maybe she, says yes, and she agrees to a sexual behavior, even though she doesn't really want to, in order to, keep things from escalating into something worse, or to keep herself safe. This could also be hurting the partner with objects during sex. And of course, forced sex or rape is considered sexual abuse. So in this list, you can see within each category, this can escalate over time. So for example, in the verbal abuse category, maybe at first it's more yelling or more name calling, and then eventually that's starting to become even more severe, doing that in front of other people. The physical abuse, in the beginning, maybe he's throwing things more, breaking things in front of her. Then maybe he starts to push her or shove her. Then that can escalate more into the more severe, injuries like strangulation or threatening her with weapons. Sexual abuse too, that can escalate over time. And we also know that this abuse escalates, through these categories too over time. So maybe in the beginning of the relationship, it's more verbal abuse. Then that can escalate and increase here into this emotional abuse category. And then, after some time, maybe it starts to escalate into that physical abuse over time, and then starts to become more sexual abuse as well. So you can see these arrows. We know that abuse escalates and increases in severity over time, and also within each of these categories, this abuse can escalate too. if you notice something like this is happening in your situation, or if you have a friend or a loved one where you notice maybe some of these things are happening for them, we definitely want to talk to survivors about safety planning and helping her make sure she knows what to do if this does start to escalate really quickly. The other thing that we know about domestic violence is, like I said, it escalates over time, but it could potentially escalate very quickly in a moment. So maybe the partners are arguing, he's being very verbally abusive, and he could escalate very quickly in that moment to something very physical and something very severe. And so we want to make sure that we are talking to survivors about safety planning and helping her create a safety plan that's unique to her and her situation to help her stay the most safe that she can. And that's something that we talk with clients about all the time. We really encourage clients to call our hotline or to call our counseling office to talk to a counselor about safety planning for your own situation. So knowing these things about domestic violence, these different types of abuse and how this escalates, how this occurs in this cycle, I wanted to really mention the impact of domestic violence on survivors and how domestic violence over time, this is repeated trauma that's happening over a span of, months, years. This definitely has an impact on survivors. Like I said, domestic violence is a trauma. And so we see a lot of clients and survivors presenting with symptoms of trauma or symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. Some examples of these symptoms include flashbacks, feeling like she's reliving a scary moment, nightmares or other, memories coming in when she doesn't want them to, or, these traumatic memories that are coming up when she least expects them to. This also is difficulty concentrating. That's a really common trauma symptom. She might have sleeping problems too. It's very common for survivors of domestic violence to have negative beliefs about themselves after experiencing the abuse, maybe because the partner, told them those things, or the partner's words start to become her own words, or even, she might start to have beliefs that she deserved it or that she should have done something to prevent it. Strong negative feelings too, we see is very common and is a trauma symptom. So feelings of, shame, of guilt, of fear, really feeling really down. Hypervigilance too is a trauma symptom. So that feeling that she's always on edge, always having to scan for danger and always having to look out, to protect herself. That's called hypervigilance. We also see that survivors of domestic violence often present with a lot of feelings of fear, especially over time. If they're in an abusive relationship, they're operating from a survival mode a lot of the time. That we know that domestic violence and trauma impacts the brain, and this can lead to feelings of fear. Most of the time she's operating from that survival brain a lot of the time. This can also lead to depression and anxiety symptoms over time. So maybe she's presenting with depression, maybe she's feeling very anxious, maybe even presenting with panic attacks or anxiety attacks. Isolation, like we mentioned before, that's a tactic that abusive partners do to control their partner, but also the experience of domestic violence can be very isolating. And maybe she feels that she doesn't have anywhere to reach out to for support. Maybe she doesn't believe she can talk to anybody, or she doesn't believe anybody will believe her. Maybe she has reached out for support in the past, and people have told her she just has to deal with it, or she needs to pray harder, or she, married this person, she needs to accept it. So definitely that isolation is a really big part of the effect of domestic violence. We also might find survivors might present with emotional problems, and to deal with those emotional problems, they might turn to unhealthy coping behaviors. That could potentially be, more drinking, or potentially drug use, or behaviors that might put them at harm, or just more risky behaviors. And that's not their fault. They're trying to cope with these extremely strong emotions and these effects of trauma and fear over time, and sometimes that might lead them to use a little bit more unhealthy coping behaviors. We also see that survivors of domestic violence tend to have lower self-esteem. Again, that can be a result of the abuse that she experienced. The partner's verbal, emotional abuse can really just eat away at her self-esteem, and she's left not feeling very confident and not feeling good about herself as a person. And finally, we know too that repeated stress and trauma over time can lead to an impact on physical health. Potentially, she has injuries or lasting medical conditions as a result of the physical abuse that she experienced. Chronic stress can also lead to chronic health conditions and potentially pain or chronic pain. And we also find that people present with somatic symptoms as well. So presenting with headaches a lot or stomach aches, these effects, these anxious feelings, these trauma symptoms can manifest themselves sometimes too as body sensations or body pains like headaches or stomach aches too. So as you can see, clearly there's an impact on survivors, and we want to talk about two ways of healing. The good news is that, PTSD or trauma, that's not a lifetime diagnosis, and it's not the case that somebody's always going to be affected in this way. There is the opportunity for healing. So I'm going to turn it over to Belinda, who's going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you for that very detailed description of domestic violence. So I know that might be hard for some of us to hear, so why don't we just stop a minute and take a couple deep breaths before we focus on the healing process. Okay, one more deep breath. So as Victoria mentioned, there is good news. There is healing, and it definitely follows a process. And this is something that we support here at Genesis, the 3 stages of healing. And our group counseling model actually follows this healing process. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we talk about the different stages. But the stages are basically safety, remembering, and reconnecting. Those are the stages that build upon each other in order for you to heal from the trauma and the domestic violence experiences that you've had. This was actually put into modern literature or modern psychology literature by Judith Herman around the 1990s, and it's proved to be very successful for our clients in their healing process. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide and talk about stage 1. So stage 1 is safety. And that is also broken down into different aspects. There's the physical, the emotional, mental, the social, which leads to the empowerment stage. So physical is your basic needs: sleep, food, clothing, for yourself, for your children, for your loved ones, for your pets. And a lot of times this will vary depending on where you are in your relationship with your abusive partner, whether you're staying in the relationship, whether you're preparing to leave, or whether you have left. But there's always ways that you can plan to increase your basic needs to have that foundation of safety and the sense of safety and stability. This is so important. A lot of women who have experienced trauma lose that sense of safety even within their own body, and that's something we work to try to regain during the stage 1. Stage 1 for us is our phase 1 groups. We focus on these 4 elements by providing psychoeducation on domestic violence, safety planning, and coping skills. So we've talked a little bit about the physical aspect of safety. Now we'll go into emotional, mental, and that's where the coping skills come into play, the coping skills that we use to help regulate our emotions. And we learn how to regulate our emotions and manage the symptoms that cause the suffering or makes one feel unsafe. And a lot of those symptoms is what Victoria just described: the depression, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, all those symptoms that you might be experiencing because of the trauma that you've experienced. We will try to apply coping skills to help regulate those emotions and symptoms. And we're going to try to develop and strengthen our skills for managing painful and unwanted experiences and to minimize the unhelpful responses to them. Victoria's already mentioned that earlier about sometimes our coping skills are not healthy for the long term, so we need to kind of minimize those coping skills and replace them with coping skills that are helpful and beneficial for the long term. Again, we go through this in our phase 1 group. with the safety planning and the domestic violence education and the coping skills. And we also encourage at this point a genuine sense of self-care to help you restore your sense of self, to help you regain some of that self-esteem that's been lost because of the abusive actions that you've experienced. That's important because that's probably been put to the back burner because of some of the things that have been said and that have happened to you. But again, at this point in time, it's important to kind of recreate that sense of self and that sense of worth so you can practice the self-care. The next stage one, safety, is of social safety, and that means finding supportive people or supportive groups, which is also one of the reasons why we strongly believe in group counseling as the basis of our counseling model. And supportive people, that means people who aren't going to abuse you mentally, emotionally, mentally, physically, or any of those ways that Victoria's gone through in detail, but they're going to allow that sense of support and trust, and it's going to be a mutual sense of support and trust. So you need to find supportive people and start building these safe relationships in the stage one healing process. And all of that builds on to a sense of empowerment or choice. No matter whether you're staying in the relationship or planning to leave, you still can find out your choices and increase your stable living situation, again, by safety planning, knowing some options you have. And that could be maybe determining what legal options you have or what financial resources available, so you know you have a choice and you have some more control in your life versus just the power and control that is exerted on you by your abusive partner. So that's stage one, safety. That's our phase one groups. It takes us into stage two, which is remembering, and that's where our phase two, our processing groups, come into play. So this is where we're going to remember or reprocess a stressful event in a very safe way. And there's several goals we have for that reprocessing. We're trying to reduce the amount of distress or intensity that comes with those memories. In other words, we're tearing down the emotional volume a little bit with those memories. We're assigning words and we're feeling our emotions that are associated with those experiences. And another goal is to revise the memories and the way they affect your life and affect your sense of identity. So we're trying to change what you believe about yourself because of what happened. So that's the number one of the stage two. The second part of stage two is the grief, grieving the losses and working through the sadness. So there's two things we're going to be usually grieving about. One is the grief about what has happened, the abusive experiences and their negative effects on one's life. Then we're also going to be grieving about what didn't happen. What was the good experiences that didn't happen? What were your goals for the relationship to begin with and how those didn't happen? So there's a sense of loss there as well. So again, this is where our phase two groups come into play. It's going to be the same clients every week, the same counselor, and you start to build that sense of safety, even more so than in stage one. And the final stage, which usually aligns with our individual counseling, if you feel like you need that in order to continue healing, it's the reconnecting. So you're going to be reconnecting with yourself. You're going to be reclaiming aspects of the person that you were before. Sometimes we've lost our sense of identity and lost our sense of self and don't really even know what our likes and dislikes are and what we are as a person. So we're reclaiming that, as well as embracing the new, embracing the ways we've changed through the healing process, embracing our strengths that we've discovered, embracing our new support that we built for ourselves with others, which is the second part of stage three. So we may be rebuilding some of these damaged relationships that we've incurred because of the isolation from the abuser, going back and re-looking at these relationships. Are they safe? Are they supportive? Do they need to be rebuilt because of the isolation and some of our actions due to being in a domestic violence relationship? And we're going to be building new relationships and finding new support systems out in the world. And on step three, with the world, also means rebuilding our beliefs about the world and how our place in it, and regaining hope for the future. So that's the healing process in a nutshell. Again, our group counseling model follows these stages, and we find that's been very beneficial and helpful to our clients in this process. whether you consider it a journey or a recovery or just healing. And so with each one of our webinars that we've presented, we'd like to add a coping skill. Again, because we go back to coping skills at such the basic foundation for the recovery or the healing process. In any stage, you're going to be using coping skills. And today we're going to be doing a guided imagery. And this is going to be focusing on relaxing our body, being more safe in our body. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes women lose that when they've been in a domestic violence. And so just as your body can become tense and stressful in response to thoughts that make us angry or anxious, it can also become more calm and relaxed in response to the calming, peaceful, and pleasant thoughts. So one of the basic ways we can add those peaceful and calming thoughts is to have a safe place. And this is a little bit of a variation on a safe place. I know we've done a webinar specifically on safe place. But when you're in your safe place, it could be a place you've been, it could be a place you want to go to. Obviously, the graphic here, the picture, is a lovely path on a fall, mid-morning perhaps. Probably not in Texas, but somewhere where the leaves are changing, and we feel that sense of peace as the changing of the seasons. But we want, when you go through your guided imagery, I want you to have your own place. If it's not this wonderful fall path, and maybe it's the beach, or maybe it's a winter scene, or maybe it's a spring garden. So whatever appeals to you as a peaceful and calm place, but make sure you explore your senses when you're in this calm place. So now I'm actually going to start the visualization exercise. If you're comfortable, close your eyes or partially close your eyes. Allow yourself to get physically comfortable. Begin with a few slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. In, out, in, out. Letting your body get relaxed. Let the chair or the bed or the couch fully support your body as you continue to breathe and relax. In, out. In, out. Now, use your imagination to picture yourself walking slowly along a path. It's a pleasant path, any kind that you wish. It's a beautiful day, and you feel relaxed and happy. You can feel the warmth and energy of the sunlight on your skin as you walk along this path. Soon you come to a gate. You know this gate leads to a special place where you feel welcomed, safe, and comfortable. You push the gate open and allow yourself to enter into your own very private garden. Your garden is filled with favorite things. Whatever's pleasing to you can be found in this place. Perhaps there are flowers, trees, animals, water, or even music. Look around and notice what is in your garden. See all the colors and objects that are in this place. Notice how beautiful they are. Look at the various shapes and the different colors and see the variety. Look at the ground. Look at the sky and see where they meet. Your garden is calm and tranquil. Everything peacefully coexists in this garden. As you are looking, become aware of how things might feel in this private place of yours. Begin to explore this place with your sense of touch. Perhaps some things are soft and warm, and others are smooth and cool. Spend some time exploring, using your sense of touch as you continue to feel at peace and comfortable. Notice what the air feels like. Is it cool or warm? Is there a breeze or is it still? Notice what the air feels like. Take your time to feel the peace and serenity in this private place. As you continue to explore your garden by seeing and feeling, become aware of the sounds that you hear in your garden. The sounds in your garden may be a number of different sounds. Some may be soft, while others may be louder. Relax and listen for a while and see if you can't identify the different sounds in your garden. As you're listening to the sounds in your garden, become aware of what smells you may smell. Take a deep breath in and notice the fragrances that are present. Breathe out. Some of them may be familiar, while others may be unfamiliar. The fragrances are pleasant and soothing. Take your time and enjoy your visit to the garden, using it in whatever way you wish. Spend the time that is necessary for you to rejuvenate and to care for yourself. When you are ready to leave, slowly walk back towards the gate of your garden. You have enjoyed your visit to the garden and feel relaxed and content. This good feeling will remain with you throughout the day. Push the gate open and return to the path that led you to the garden. As you make a path to the here and now, remember that you can use your imagination to return to your private garden at any time you wish. Visit your garden anytime you would like to relax, to be comforted, or just to enjoy its beauty. You are now peaceful and calm, both emotionally and physically, and you are ready to resume your day. Stretch gently, open your eyes, feel refreshed and alert. Well, that's it for the webinar today. I hope you've enjoyed the information and you found it useful. We do want to say that these webinars were being presented on a weekly basis. We started back in May, but starting this month in October, they're going to a monthly basis. So the next webinar will be on the first Tuesday of November. But there's the YouTube channel that has all the previous webinars that we've presented if you want to go back and rewatch some or watch some you haven't watched before. So on behalf of Victoria and I, we say thank you. Victoria, you have any last words?
No, thank you for watching. It looks like November 3rd will be our next webinar live on Zoom.
Thank you again for joining us, and remember, have a great and peaceful day. Bye-bye.